Welcome to NovoEdTalks, where we reveal real-world strategies and expert insights from learning and development professionals. In every episode, we chat with practitioners, course designers, learning strategists, and business leads. We hear about their experiences in the learning industry and predictions for the profession and the trends that they're seeing. But before we get started, a little bit about NovoEd. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoEd is a people-centric, capability-building platform that combines social and collaborative learning to drive performance readiness at scale. Through cohort-based experiences centered around human interaction, NovoEd taps into collective wisdom, placing each learner at the center of perspective, application, and expertise. Large enterprises such as 3M, GE, Marriott International, and Nestle partner with NovoEd to accelerate their critical initiatives, reconnect teams, and achieve rapid alignment through learning that is felt, experienced, and swiftly transformed into impact. Now, let's meet our guest for today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NovoEdTalks podcast, a space for training trailblazers to get real. My name is Melissa Fisk. I am the producer of the NovoEdTalks podcast, and today I am joined by Cassidy Browning, who is the manager of learning solutions at Indeed. Cassidy is a highly skilled learning and development manager with 17 years of experience in education, human resources, and program and operations management. She's inspired by the transformational possibilities of learning experiences because our ways of learning become our ways of working. I love that. Her commitments to diversity, equity, inclusion, and data-driven design fuel perpetual growth and improvement. Cassidy, welcome to the NovoEdTalks podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Really excited for the opportunity to discuss.
Awesome. Well, why don't you start by just kind of introducing yourself, talking a little bit more about your role and your company?
Well, I like to talk about a few family businesses that I'm a part of. The first one, and the biggest one, is probably education in general. So I come from a line of educators all around my family. I've worked in education in a couple capacities. So I've worked in top 10 universities in the United States. I've worked in community organizations. I've worked now in the private sector. I've done a couple, run the gamut a bit, and I've really always been in that space. Even when I worked in the service industry, I was doing education there. So I was in service industry in a beer bar, and I became the beer education person. So wherever I am, it tends to be where I gravitate is education. Another area is human resources. So my mother also worked in human resources roles, and I've worked in proper HR roles with full life cycle management that has provided really invaluable experience and understanding of how we work and how we behave at work and how we can be at work. And then finally is the arts. So my father's an artist and an art teacher, but he's an artist. My uncle's professional actors, and that's actually where I spent the most of my time in education as a student, proper student. So several degrees in theater, history, criticism, acting, spent a lot of time in costume design and things like that. So the reason why I bring that up is because so much of what I learned about the arts really comes through in what I do every day. So how we collaborate and make meaning, who's invited to participate in what we're creating, how is the stage and the audience set, I think is a really critical question. The importance of play, and then the power of live. So when we're together in a live space, it's ephemeral, it's fleeting. There's something we're co-creating together. It's unique. And it's important that we were there. We had an impact on the space. So it's really, there's a different energy to it. So even though we're virtual, I think there are ways we can kind of mine that. So those are the family businesses. And then I would just also add design thinking. And then, as I mentioned, I worked in the service industry and then even the medical industry during COVID. I helped run a vaccine clinic. So this is where a lot of my customer service, operations, systems thinking, and empathy have come through.
And could you talk a little bit about like what it is that you're doing at Indeed specifically now?
Absolutely. So a little context is just that I manage a team of learning architects, and we create learning experiences to create critical business needs. So we're actually serving all of the learners at the company, which is about 13,000 folks across the globe. And so at Indeed, we put job seekers first, and we like to say on our team that we put our learners first.
Awesome. Wow. And what a big group of folks. With that big group of folks, why don't you talk a little bit about, who those learners are and what some of their biggest challenges are?
All of our Indeedians, that's the word we use for people who work at Indeed. So when I say that, sometimes people are like, what was that word? So we call ourselves Indeedians. So there are 13,000 of us across the globe. We include research and development folks in tech roles. That's our largest group. We also have sales, client success, and corporate functions. So we really run the gamut in terms of kinds of learners, the things they might want to learn, the ways that they might want to learn, how this can fit into the flow of their work. So in terms of their priorities, we've done some really great data gathering on this, and we know that they have a strong desire for social and participatory learning experiences, both as learners and as like facilitators or subject matter experts. And they're equally interested in learning for their current and their future roles, which is really exciting.
So how do you approach, with kind of like having very different, learning pathways, how do you approach some of the challenges of reaching those folks?
Absolutely. Well, and I think one of the biggest challenges for them is time. And so that's universally, I think I think I've heard this on other issues of this podcast as well, is how do we get our learners to invest that time? And it is very different across those roles. So someone who's client facing, their hours, their minutes are structured and allocated. Whereas someone in an R&D role, it might be scoped in their scope of role that they do some research, that they do some noodling, as I like to say. And so it's really about making sure we know our learners and that we can meet them in the styles that work for them. If it's going to be more bite-sized, we'll get them involved. Are they going to need more accountability buddies and something that's a little bit more of a cohort-based model? So I think it requires us to have a lot of knowledge of our learners, but then also understanding even that isn't going to be universal in terms of like all R&D folks won't learn in the same way. So multiplicity and having things be a lot of points of entry or different ways to access information, having it be having some optionality really helps. So I would say that time is certainly a challenge, and then also knowing how to focus their energies. So when they do have that time and they're sitting there and going, okay, what could I do? I could learn from my current role. I could learn from my future role. I don't know, what's going to actually get me there. What's of the highest value? So we're also really interested in how we can help managers to help guide them as well. So those are top two challenges, I feel.
That's awesome. And also so, important, like I love that piece of having the managers like help them like figure out like best ways to kind of use your time for learning, because sometimes it's just so overwhelming with where to start. It's like, I have time, but I don't even know how to start.
And I think it takes that relationship to a great place. Like it's a great trust building exercise too, to say, hey, I'm interested in you, not just as you sort of fulfill this one current thing that you are doing. How can we grow you? How can we expand? What else might we do? And I think it can really enhance that manager direct report relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. With the rise of remote work and virtual collaboration, how has your approach to learning and development adapted to ensure that your employees are equipped with kind of the necessary skills for this new digital workplace?
We've had to learn to go where they are. So, really paying attention to where Indeedians are exchanging information, where are they getting help, and understanding, again, like it might be different by or internal organization, how they do that. My learning architects and I tend to be on all the Slack channels that we can be on. We try to kind of have our toes in everything that we can to see the behaviors that are happening, to see what seems to work, what seems to land, what doesn't. And so things like Slack is really where our company lives and where folks share information and find help and support. And then also Glean is a new tool that we've really been leveraging, which can scrape. It's an AI tool that scrapes from all sorts of internal platforms. So say you're like, I know I talked with somebody about this one topic. Melissa, I know I know there was something we communicated about this NovoEd something, and I could put in your name and maybe NovoEd, and it could scrape emails, Slack messages, all sorts of, Google documents, and start to populate those things, from official things, but also internal things. So it's a really powerful tool for us to think about how can we make sure our work and our things are discoverable there and prioritized there. So those are two major tools that we've really leaned into to kind of go where folks are. And another thing is something I already sort of touched on, but that multiplicity, that optionality, and the flexibility. So we tend to have content that doesn't just have one life. So we're addressing a particular learning experience issue. If someone wants folks to know how to use a particular tool better, we wouldn't just have a demo video. We would have a demo video. We would also have a job aid. We might have something synchronous. We might have something, we try to approach things and take that material in different directions. Increases our ROI, which is great because we're going to reach more people. But also, if I go to, say, a pathway on our LXP and I'm saying, all right, what can I look at? If videos work for me, great, I have a video. If I just want that job aid, great, I've got it. Or if I finish that course, I can't remember the thing, I can go back, oh, there's that job aid as well. So, if we can have that multiplicity and that optionality, we've really found that really resonates with folks. And then I think also just mindful data gathering, because we need it, but we need to address it as a key trust building opportunity. I think we tend to be a little greedy sometimes, and we're like, we want all the data, give it to me now. And if we're not mindful about what we're gathering, how we're using it, and how we're sharing back out for that accountability and transparency to say, this is what we're hearing and this is how we're going to implement it. Does that sound right? I think that the survey fatigue is very real in the virtual world. It's just too easy. It's after your Zoom call. It's after you're kind of getting bombarded by these all the time. And everybody's like, it's just one question. It's just two questions. But there's that death by 1,000 cuts that I think can happen. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it's in the consumer world, like for just as an average, like everyday consumer, you're getting bombarded with like text messages constantly after you buy anything or from any appointment. So then when it comes to like that's real too, in just like your personal life. And then that also transfers over into like work life. And it's like, I just don't even see them anymore. It's like,
yeah. It just becomes static and we're just, it can become really, really challenging to gather that data. And just one particular example that might be interesting to folks too is that the speed of information and best practices, the speed of change is so fast right now. So one particular example was just our strategy for company-wide upskilling in AI. There was an ask from some leadership for some job aids to say, we want people to use these things quickly. So it was like job aid on ChatGPT or a job aid on Grammarly. And our notion was like, oh, nobody wants another job aid. Like, that's not necessarily what everybody wants. And these tools are intuitive, just get in and do it. And so in thinking about how to best engender that behavior, that was one where we pitched and it was well received, and we deployed it was a Slack channel around AI to kind of pebble people like, okay, go try this tool now, go try that. Because the likelihood of them going to an LXP, opening up the job aid, then doing the thing was not quite, but it allowed us to fit in the flow of work and really kind of create community and conversation.
yeah, absolutely. Do you have like an example of another kind of like successful case study or L&D initiative that like really significantly impacted employee performance, or would you want to expand upon like just what you were just mentioning?
Well, another exciting one that we've done recently was the QAAE boot camp, and I will spell that out. So Quality Assurance Automation Engineer boot camp. And so that was a particular initiative for workforce transformation to say, hey, we have folks in QA roles. These are about to be phased out because of the way that we distribute work, what happens where. And so we needed more QAAE folks as opposed to QA folks. And so we went ahead and developed a program. We leveraged internal subject matter experts, and they taught the courses. So we worked with them to help develop a good structure, craft the cohorts, deploy that, have there be strong assessments and things. And so it was a really successful program, really high rate of completion and success in terms of those folks moving into those roles. And what's also great is that those skills that took us from QA to QAAE are often ones that can take folks into SWE roles in general. And so that need for software engineers is real. There's a lot of competition in the field. And so we've actually been able to parlay that and kind of consult with other programs. The Boost internship in particular, I'd love to boost, haha. for the pun, but an amazing program that we just completed the first cohort of. And I say we, it wasn't my team that Indeed just completed, but this was a paid internship and a coding boot camp that ended with an interview into a SWE role. And this was a goal to increase underrepresented minorities and underrepresented genders in technical roles. So it was a really great way in which something that we deployed that made someone's role viable again and kind of gave them a new path was also used to support one of our DEIB Plus initiatives. So it's kind of taken a couple different roads. It's been really great, and the learners found a lot of great value, but also our subject matter experts. One of my favorite things is that one of them had been in their role for 20 years. And he said, I always had a fear of public speaking until I did this. And like, this showed me that I could do that. And I'm like, 20 years, that someone kind of had this story in their head, but we were able to kind of give this opportunity for them to stretch. And so it's that multi-directional learning experience that I find really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. With so many people benefiting from it, it's just a very like feel good case study that you can be like,
It is.
That's awesome. You've mentioned a couple of tools that you all use, but what role does technology play in your L&D programs? And are there other tools or platforms that you really leverage?
Absolutely. I'll say I'm a big fan of the digital whiteboard, and this is maybe one of my Cassidy's initiatives of whatever the tool is, wherever I am, if it's Miro or Mural, now we use Lucid Spark. Just a huge fan of that. And that really also comes from my design thinking background where I'm like whiteboard all day, stickies on the board is the stereotype for a reason. I really love it because I think too, when we think about how we're crafting those experiences before, during, after, it really allows me to, we can craft a space where we're going to engage with one another. You can engage ahead of time, kind of see where we're headed, add some thoughts. We can do things synchronously. You can also revisit it later. Your archive is already there. And then there's some really great things you can do on the back end of exporting data and activity and things like that. So I'm a huge proponent of the digital whiteboard for all of the design thinking reasons of co-creation and building on one another's ideas and collective intelligence and, just put it all down there, right? Those brainstorming principles of just like, it's not precious. It feels like a brainstorming moment. So I think it can feel very different than, say, maybe a survey or a quiz or a module or something that you're going through that can feel very official. And there's one way to do things correctly. And also those tools tend to invite some joy and silliness and, emojis and images and all sorts of things. And so I think it can, if we talk about things as a stage, as I like to do, it kind of sets the stage for more of a black box theater. Like we're here to kind of experiment and get messy and kind of be in it and not be precious about it. So definitely an advocate of those digital whiteboards in whatever ways you can leverage them or whatever ones you have available to you. I mentioned Slack a great deal. I think another important thing we do is keeping an eye outward to new tools or evolving tools. So at a company like Indeed, we were founded in 2004, I believe. I was like trying to make sure I'm not telling lies. What can happen is you may have made a decision about a tool, but that tool might be evolving. There might be changes and stuff. And so making sure that you're intentional about your practice of looking to how things are changing in the field and that we're trying out new tools. And so that's on my team in particular. We make intentional efforts to be looking outside, trying new things. Can we get into a sandbox? And then also, you may be more comfortable in a particular course authoring tool. Let's intentionally stretch you. And we know it might not be the fastest deployment, but let's intentionally stretch because you're not going to ever just be sitting in a bay window, thinking big thoughts and wanting to experiment and make a new course, right? Let's use this as that, an extra value add to the creation of something. So I think that is a practice too, because we leverage what we think is the best tool for the ask. But I think that's been a really successful way, and also that we keep ourselves learning and challenging ourselves. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. There's so many, new tech, new tools all of the time. And you have to be like, is there something that could do this better? But then also realizing that, yes, that is that such thing as like shiny object syndrome, where it's like, okay.
Yes. Yeah. So the balance, I think, too, and then partnering closer with our vendors and our learning operations team and stuff too, to make sure we're as much of experts as we can be on what we do have in-house. So yeah, it's been really helpful.
Thinking a little bit just about the industry in general, especially as things have kind of rapidly evolved over the past 5 years, what are some key takeaways that you've seen in the past 5 years in the L&D space?
I feel like a broken record, but this optionality, I think optionality for the diversity of the workforce. I know we don't really talk about learning styles, but if that's a framework that resonates, fine. I'm just like, what's going to resonate with people? They might be in office only, they might be hybrid, they might be virtual only, they might be 16 hours ahead of you or behind, and this and that. So just all the different ways in which our workforce is functioning, the more ways we can give people to access, the simpler we can make it, the more streamlined, the more centralized, the more points of entry. I think it just really helps for us to, or that's really been far more successful. So our content, what we're building, doesn't tend to have a single path or a life. People are hungry to learn, and they're hungry to share their expertise. They want to share, and they want those opportunities. And I see that also as an important DEIB plus initiative as well, because like, who gets the mic, who gets those opportunities, they get to put that on their resume. We're really intentional about showcasing our subject matter experts as well. So you still need an engagement strategy. The barriers are real, but keeping in mind that there is that hunger. And I would also say that uniformity is not a human-centered goal. So the notion of I'm going to go through X course and get Y learning this can be a point of tension with the business, right? Because they're saying, well, we want this outcome. And I think if we're thinking about a Kirkpatrick scale, if we're measuring in the ones and the twos, then I don't think it's quite human-centered. And I think shifting the mindset more to the threes and the fours is a way for us to say, yeah, people are going to come out of this with different things. And in fact, when they do come out of things with something different, I think that's great. I think it shows they were actually involved and engaged. And so the arts made me probably too comfortable with that, with that multiplicity and with, that differentiation. But I think it really shows true engagement. And so I think I've been seeing this, and I want to like kind of keep stoking that fire and how we can make the business more comfortable with that, and see that that's actually where we're going to get behavior change.
Yeah, absolutely. Behavior change and like great ideas, right? That's like where it's
innovation.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And if we're doing this, like, hey, our ways of learning become our ways of working. If we're creating these spaces where we help one another, where we share, where we do all these things, it's going to be far beyond we all need to take a compliance survey. I mean, or compliance training, and it's on my brain because we're in compliance season right now, but, or just even like folks know how to enter their time, and that's important. They do need to know that. But if we can involve some other things or how we do the things can be really key.
Yeah, absolutely. On kind of the flip side of my last question there, as the workplace continues to evolve and, we're kind of more open to things evolving and being different and getting that kind of input, how do you see the future of L&D kind of changing? And are there certain like trends or emerging technologies that you think are really going to shape kind of the next 5 years?
This is when I talk about world domination on my team. It's like my world domination plans include. So I would say I think L&D has an incredible potential to be a rehumanizing force in companies. And so I think we folks, a lot of times we hear sentiment around feeling kind of dehumanized or feeling like a cog in a wheel or feeling isolated. For all sorts of reasons. And I think we can be a really amazing opportunity where let's all get together and do trivia, like that might not resonate as much as hey, I had this person as a mentor, or I was in a course with this person over a couple of weeks and things like that. Those connections, I think are really real. And we have the potential to really rehumanize the workplace and inform that company culture. So that ways of learning becoming ways of working of feedback culture, like making that okay. Like, feedback isn't a bad thing. Any kind of feedback, right? Like, let's give it early and often, and let's have a culture of that being a regular thing, and let's make space for failure and for innovation. And a favorite quote from one of our subject matter experts was he said, he was leading one of these SWE skills kind of courses, and someone was asking a question and they kind of felt bad about it, and he was like, "Look, I don't know, but we can get lost together. Like that's the point. Like I don't know everything, but I'm here for us to kind of figure it out together." And in fact, the figuring out was the skill, right? That was the real behavior change that I think unlocks so much. And so in terms of like fostering trust, sharing and helping cultures and things like that. I think that's so exciting to me. And then perhaps controversially, I will say taking up space. So I get a little scared when we talk about micro learnings and teeny tiny learnings and invisible secret learnings happening over here, because then when we want to take up space, it's like, we can kind of get that resistance, and it could be hard to get the investment of resources or time. And so I'm really interested in how we can kind of mindfully take up space. And then also how we can continue to serve things like the workforce needs. So like with the QAE boot camp, things are going to keep changing at more and more of a rapid pace. And we can't sustainably hire entire new workforces, every 5 years for the new skills that are needed. So I think that's really key, is looking at competency and skill mapping against job architecture, against rubrics, and then decoder ring happens, boop, 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 boop. I'm in this role, I'm rated at this on my skills. Oh, I could just, add this recipe and maybe go for this kind of a role or stretch into here. I think that kind of mapping has such a great potential to enable and empower folks to do internally what Indeed helps them to do externally, to help people get jobs. So I think those are the things I'm excited about. I know I named 50, but there you go.
That's awesome, though. I love that. And just like some really great, like conceptual stuff in there too, that I think is very applicable to any kind of organization right now. So I think that those are great insights. I'm very excited to ask you this last question here, just because I think you have such a phenomenally diverse background. But as kind of a fun send off, what advice would you give to folks just stepping into a leadership role?
Well, so this one I reach back into my community organizing and activist roots and my scholarly roots, and really working with and wanting to hold up work by, for, and about folks of color and queer folks and women. So I say with, comma, not for. So do things with people, not for them. And so anytime, and that combined with design thinking, design thinking tries to say like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Who are we solving it for? But I say with, who are we solving it with? And does it need to be solved in that way? And so I kind of combine those to say, all right, like make sure that we're working with people, getting that collective intelligence. The IKEA effect is real. So IKEA effect being like that bookcase you helped build, the ones behind me. The bookcase you helped build, you're like, yes, that's my bookcase. I built it. Like you have more investment in that. And then I would also just say, we can't always do things with all of our learners. I can't get all of their input. I can't create with all of them. So in those moments where you are working kind of for, really trying to activate empathy and pairing that with humility. So I can put on my empathy hat and I can think about what it might be like to be you, but I do still need to remain humble of like, that's not my lived experience. So I think empathy can sometimes be wielded as like the solution to all of that. So I try to remind myself of the humility part.
Yeah.
And then how we do things being as important as what we do. So if we're saying we're going to do one thing, but the manner in which we do it really contradicts that, just really making sure that the form is fitting the function, being curious, asking questions, joy and connection, I think is really key. So play music, celebrate, be silly. And if you're willing to be silly as a leader too, it makes space for failure in many ways, right? Like you don't have to be perfect in these spaces. And so owning those things can really be kind of how you model that behavior. And then the last one is sort of theater plus teaching. So have an outline and be ready to let it go. So have a plan, but no, it's probably going to go out the window. And so this is like teaching and improvisation to me. and the yes and principle. So if anybody's ever done improv training, yes and is that general? Yeah, shaking heads. And so, that's that notion of someone in improv gives you something, you don't go, "Ugh, that's a dumb idea." You don't let you don't just let it fall. You go, yes, and I'm going to build on it. And that shows that optimism, flexibility, bias for action. So, just thinking about the impact, especially when you're a leader, if someone comes to you with an idea or a concern or this or that in a space, thinking about the impact of if you were to not yes and, if you were to poo-poo something, if you said no, or if you kind of dismissed, it isn't just that idea that's been kind of put aside. That person can feel that way. And also, you don't know what that idea might have spurred in other people. So if you put it in a box, somebody else might have gone, "Oh, I had an idea based on that, but I'll just put that in the box too." So you kind of end up closing off some futures that you might not even know about.
Yeah, that's all. I can't tell you how much all of that advice resonates with me so much as a mom of a 4 and almost 3-year-old. But I feel like that can apply from, leading little children all the way through like leading at an enterprise company level. But all of those are just such great things, and I think like really get at the core of like what it means to like be human, which I think is just really, really beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing all of that, Cassidy, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the NovoEdTalks podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another episode.